Hi there, I'm Rich Clater, co-owner of this house at 1 Harbor Street. My co-owner is Ross Vanderpyle. Ross and I bought this house in late October 2019, and we saved it from the wrecking ball. The house had been approved for demolition by the local historic committee, and we were able to convince the owner to sell it to us so that we could restore it. The house here was built in 2 parts and moved to this site. The back part of the house right behind me was built in the early 1700s or maybe even earlier than that, and then moved to this location in about 1825. And the front part of the house, facing Harbor Street, dates to probably about that time, 1825 or so. It's a very simple construction, but also very typical of an early construction. And the house was used for worker housing for the Boston and Sandwich Glass factory, and this was the workers' neighborhood. So as you can see, it's a humble little structure and needs some work. Off the back end here, you can see the different shingles. There was a shed addition that was built in probably the 1940s or so, and that had sort of rotted away, so we tore that down. And then we're going to replace that with a small addition, basically in the same footprint, that'll allow us to put a bathroom back here and some stairs up into the second story. So maybe we just walk around the outside and take a quick look. Now, over the years, this house has been modified a little bit. They did some replacement foundation work here at some point in the time. The windows have been replaced with more modern windows. We're going to take them back in time. We'll take these modern windows out and we'll put in more historically appropriate windows to the structure. It's a very small house that measures 18 feet from the ground to the peak there. And there are 2 little bedrooms upstairs and then a sleeping loft on the back. We're getting ready to get started on the restoration in the coming days. The first step will be to lift up the building in the areas where we have to replace the foundation. You'll see a better example of what needs to be done when we go inside. The intent of today's filming is to give us a good picture of what it looks like before the restoration starts. Since the fall of 2019, we have been demoing the building. We've taken out everything that is of value and stored it in our little garage out back. You can, So this is just the material that we saved. Includes flooring, a lot of old wood plank flooring. Some of this was from another house, some of this was from this house. This material is 20th century flooring, and while it was on top of everything, we may use some of that, particularly on the addition, but the oldest flooring is all this stuff, and that we'll put back down. We've taken beams out of the house that can be reused, and the intention here is to try and use as much of this stuff as we can. We've got doors, different trim. We labeled it all. It's all categorized so we know where it came out. So when it comes time to put it back in, we can look at our labels and see, okay, that came from the keeping room and that's where that belongs. So while it's not an official inventory of every stick, we've certainly got a pretty good idea of what came out and where it needs to go back. And then all the stuff that was rotten or not able to be salvaged, we have carted off to the landfill. This is the break between what was a really old house that was moved here and what was rebuilt in the 1820s. This overhang is a very typical feature of early construction. You see it often in the old salt boxes. But what its main purpose was to keep the rain off of you when you walked out the door. It was an early form of a gutter. These early houses didn't have gutters. So this is while it doesn't look like much, is a key feature to help date the house. Let's go inside. So as I said, in the last 18 months, we've basically been undoing all of the different elements of the house. This is the oldest part. Back here is what would have been called the keeping room. And this is the original fireplace, cooking fireplace, and adjacent wood stove. Wood burning bake oven. This helps date the house to an early period. And what we've done over time is we've taken the interior walls off to expose the sheathing over here. This area down here is the old root cellar. It's round, and this is where they would have kept their vegetables and their perishables, both in the summer and winter, to preserve them. One of the things that we know that this house was moved here is because this is the original interior wall. This is a plaster. This is plaster lath, and the lath was hand split with an axe or with hand tools. The nails used to nail them to the wall were hand wrought, made by a blacksmith. And this wall goes behind the chimney. So they never would have plastered a wall and then built a chimney in front of it. So they probably moved this whole section of the house here, left the plaster here, and then built the chimney afterwards. We also know that the bricks in the root cellar are 19th century bricks, and those are newer than the house that sits on top of them. So that's another piece of evidence. Okay, so when this used to be the bathroom when we bought the house, and we took the wall down and the shower out and the toilet and the sink, and then when we took the wall down, we found this ghost mark of old plaster that shows these white lines, and you can see the stairs, the old stairway that went up into the loft of the house. And that's how the original residents here would have gone to bed each night. They would have climbed these stairs and then slept up there in the loft. And this door here is a 18th century door, board and batten, and that would have connected into this little room. And this room was probably called the birthing room. And this would have been the place where, they would have given birth, and then that would have been where the nursery was for the young babies. So when we demoed the building, we kept finding little pieces of information. And we took the wall off of this wall, and we found this old framing which shows the outline of an old door that was here. And it's much wider than a typical door. A typical door might have been this wide. This is about another foot or 18 inches wider. And it might have been part of a barn or something. So the original use of this house may or may not have been a house. It may have been a barn or something like that. Now where I'm standing, there used to be floor joists. Those were rotted and we've taken them out. And as you'll see in these other two rooms, we've removed everything that was not going to be reused. And we're now in the position of starting to lift up this house so we can replace this foundation. So the next step is going to be to take a load off of the walls with jacks and with some supports, and then we will dig out all of this rock and take the last of the sill logs out. We're going to dig this down to be about 2.5 feet deep. We're going to pour a concrete foundation and then put some stone or brick on top that will be seen from the outside, and then replace the wall. And once all that's done, we'll then replace the joists and put the floor back. The floor that we took out of here is in the shed, so the plan will be to reuse the floor that was here all those many years ago. So we'll just do a quick tour of the upstairs and then we'll call it a day. This room, similar situation. Behind that piece of plywood is another original fireplace. These joists that are still here are in great shape. We may have to pull them out and put them back, but they're strong and sturdy. And this foundation and sill log along the wall is also sound and sturdy. And so our game plan is to leave this all intact, and then we'll just replace, again, the joists and put the flooring back and clean everything up. As I said, we're going to place the windows and give this house some new life. So quick tour upstairs and then we'll call it a day. See this very narrow, steep stair? That's very typical of this period of construction. And you can just see these tiny little rooms would have been bedrooms at the time. Our plan in here is to turn this into a bathroom, and it'll be a quite nice full-size bathroom when it's all done. And as I said earlier, this roof and rafters is newer construction than the old house. In fact, this corner here was probably replaced in the 20th century, but the rest of these rafters are all 19th century, probably around that 1825 time period. And then, just to finish off, we're going back into the early part of the structure, and this would have been the sleeping loft. This was all plastered when we bought the house, and in fact it had a big layer of insulation to keep the heat into the living quarters down below. And we've since taken all of the plaster off and the lath and exposed these beams. And when we found that, we found these really early rafter beams that are mortise and tenon construction and hand-hewn. They were made with an axe. And this helps date the house to that early 1700s. So predating the Boston and Sandwich glass company that was here at the time. And these floorboards, while they look a little rough right now, are really beautiful, wide plank. They run the whole length, 24 feet from this point to that point. And our intention will be to take these up, finish them, and then put them back down. And that's pretty much it.